3 months passed after Laura Bishop's failed petition, and for a while, it seemed like the galaxy had forgotten about humanity. Ships moved through their trade routes. Colonies grew their crops and built their homes. People lived their ordinary lives under alien suns. Then the Verath made their move, and ordinary life ended. The announcement came through official conclave channels on a Tuesday morning, Earth time. The Verath Dominion, citing a territorial clause buried deep in conclave law, had filed a formal claim of sovereignty over 4 of humanity's 17 colony worlds. The clause was old, older than most species in the conclave could remember, and it said that any territory occupied by a non-member species could be claimed by a full member if the conclave approved it. Humanity was not a full member. Humanity had never been allowed to be a full member. And now, that fact was being used like a knife. The 4 worlds named in the claim were not empty outposts. One of them was New Cascadia, a green and beautiful planet covered in forests and rivers, home to over 80 million people. Families lived there. Children went to school there. People had been born and buried there for 3 generations. And now, the Verath said it belonged to them. Laura Bishop received the news on a transport ship, halfway between Aethon Prime and Earth. She read the official document 4 times, each time hoping she had misunderstood the language. She had not. The words were clear. Humanity had 90 standard days to remove every man, woman, and child from those 4 worlds. If they refused, the Verath would remove them by force, with full conclave authorization. Laura locked herself in her cabin and sent messages to every diplomatic contact she had. She called in every favor. She begged, argued, and reasoned with anyone who would listen. Most did not listen. The ones who did said the same thing. The law was the law. Humanity should have accepted its place a long time ago. On Earth, the United Nations Defense Council held an emergency session. The room was full of shouting. Some leaders wanted to comply with the order and evacuate the colonies to avoid war. Others wanted to fight. A few wanted to do both at the same time, somehow. Nathan Cole sat through 3 hours of arguing before he spoke. When he did, the room went quiet. 80 million people, he said. That is what we are talking about. 80 million people on New Cascadia alone. We do not have the ships to evacuate them in 90 days. We do not have the worlds to put them on, and even if we did, where does it stop? They take 4 worlds today. They take 4 more next year. Then they take Earth. What are you suggesting, Admiral? Asked the council chair. I am suggesting that we do not leave. The room erupted again. Nathan waited for the noise to die down. Then he said, I am not suggesting we start a war. I am suggesting we make it very clear that removing us will cost more than they are willing to pay. The council gave him permission to position the defense fleet near New Cascadia as a show of strength. They did not give him permission to fire unless fired upon. Nathan accepted the order and left the room. On his way out, he pulled Greg Holt aside. Prepare the fleet for full combat deployment, Nathan told him, and do it quietly. Greg looked at him for a long moment. You think it is going to come to that? I think they are not bluffing, Nathan said, and I think we cannot afford to bluff either. While Earth's military prepared, the people on New Cascadia began to panic. Evacuation orders were broadcast on every screen and speaker on the planet. Transport ships started landing at the major cities, but there were not enough of them. Lines stretched for miles. Families carried what they could and left everything else behind. Some people refused to leave at all. One of those people was Tony Ruiz. Tony was 38 years old, a former Marine who had served 2 tours on the Outer Rim before settling on New Cascadia to build a quiet life. He had a small house near the coast, a garden he tended every morning, and a stubborn streak that ran deeper than the planet's roots. When the evacuation orders came, Tony did not pack a bag. He walked to the community hall in his town, stood on the front steps, and started talking. Within an hour, a crowd had gathered. Within a day, his words were being broadcast across every colony network humanity had. "They want us to run," Tony said, his voice rough and steady. "They want us to leave our homes, our land, the graves of our families, because a piece of paper, written by aliens who have never set foot on this soil, says it belongs to them. I did not build my home so someone else could take it. I did not plant my garden so someone else could walk through it. I am not leaving. And if you are listening to this, wherever you are, I am asking you not to leave either. This is our world. We built it, we bled for it, and we are going to keep it." The broadcast spread fast. On colony after colony, people who had been packing their belongings stopped and put them down. The evacuation slowed. Then, it nearly stopped. Nathan Cole watched Tony's broadcast aboard the Adamant Vigil and said nothing. But Greg Holt noticed a small, brief change in the Admiral's expression. It might have been pride. Far beneath the ice of Europa, Kevin Marsh was not watching any broadcasts. He was working. He had not left the laboratory in 3 weeks. He slept on a cot in the corner and ate whatever was brought to him. His team of 12 scientists worked in shifts around him, running tests, building components, and triple-checking every calculation. The Oblivion device was real. It worked. Kevin had proven that beyond any doubt. The question now was whether it could be scaled up, controlled, and delivered in a way that mattered. The answer, after 3 weeks of brutal work, was yes. Kevin built a device the size of a large suitcase. When activated, it would generate a field that expanded outward in a perfect sphere, erasing everything it touched. The field could be calibrated for size, from a few meters to several kilometers. Anything inside the sphere when it activated would cease to exist. Not destroyed, not scattered, not burned, just gone. The space itself would be empty, as if nothing had ever been there. Kevin contacted Nathan on a secure channel. "It is ready," he said. "One device, fully functional. I can have it on your ship in 48 hours. Nathan stared at the screen. "What is the maximum radius?" "At current calibration, about 12 kilometers, enough to erase a small moon." "And there is no defense against it? No shield? No countermeasure?" Kevin shook his head slowly. "No. That is the thing about it, Nathan. It does not attack matter or energy. It attacks reality. You cannot block something that removes the space you are standing in." Nathan was quiet for a long time. "Bring it to me," he said. "And Kevin, no one else hears about this. Not yet." While Kevin prepared to leave Europa, Laura Bishop made one last attempt at peace. She traveled alone to the Selthari homeworld, a pale blue planet wrapped in clouds, and requested a private meeting with a Selthari elder named Chorus. The Selthari were different from the Verith. They were old, yes, and powerful, but they had always been the quieter voice in the conclave. Chorus, in particular, had shown a kind of careful curiosity toward humanity that no other elder species ever had. They met in a garden filled with plants that glowed softly in the dim light. Chorus was tall and thin, with long, delicate limbs and eyes like pools of silver. He listened to Laura without interrupting, which was more than anyone else in the galaxy had done for her in months. When she finished, Chorus folded his hands together and spoke. "You must understand, Laura. The Verath do not truly want your worlds. 4 small colonies mean nothing to an empire of 10,000 systems. This is a test." "A test of what?" Laura asked. "Of whether your species will submit. The Conclave has always controlled younger races by making them accept their place early. Those who submit are tolerated. Those who resist are made into examples. The Verath want to see which kind of species you are. And if we resist, Then the conclave will authorize a full military response. Not just against your colonies, against Earth itself. They will disarm you, occupy your worlds, and control your development for the next 1,000 years. That is what they have done to every species that has ever challenged them. Laura looked at the glowing plants and said nothing for a moment. Then she asked a question she had not planned to ask. What happens if we don't play their game at all? What if we do something they have never seen before? Chorus was silent for a long time. The silver in his eyes seemed to shift. Then the galaxy will learn what happens when a young species is pushed beyond reason. Laura left the Selthari homeworld the next morning. She sent a single encrypted message to Nathan Cole. It said, "They are coming for everything. Be ready." 2 days later, long-range sensors on the Adamant Vigil detected a massive energy signature moving through conclave space toward New Cascadia. The Verath fleet had launched. Over 300 warships, each one larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever built, were heading straight for the colony. Nathan Cole stood on the bridge of his ship and looked at the sensor display. 68 ships against 300. The math was simple and ugly. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. All ships, form defensive line at New Cascadia high orbit. We are not going anywhere. Then he sent a private message to Kevin Marsh. How soon can you get here? Kevin's reply came back in seconds. Already on my way. The Verath fleet came out of faster-than-light travel, like a wall of iron, appearing from nothing. 314 warships, arranged in a tight battle formation, dropped into normal space, just beyond the orbit of New Cascadia's outermost moon. Each ship was enormous, covered in dark armor plating, and carrying enough firepower to burn a continent to glass. At the center of the formation sat the flagship, a vessel so large it cast a shadow across the smaller ships around it. Aboard that flagship stood Dreth Sokon, War Marshal of the Verath Dominion. He was tall even by Verath standards, nearly 9 feet, with a chest full of campaign medals and scars that told their own stories. He had commanded fleets for over 2 centuries. He had crushed rebellions on 16 worlds. He had never lost a battle, and he did not expect to lose this one. When his sensors showed the human fleet waiting for him, he almost did not bother looking at the display. 68 ships. Small ships, by Verath standards. Ships made of thin metals and basic composites, held together with technology that the Verath considered primitive. Sokon had seen bigger fleets assembled by species that no longer existed. Open a channel to the human commander, Sokon said. Nathan Cole was standing on the bridge of the Adamant Vigil when the communication request came through. He had been standing there for 6 hours, ever since the first long-range sensors detected the Verath fleet approaching. He had not eaten. He had not sat down. He had simply stood at the forward viewport and watched the empty space where the enemy would arrive. Now they were here. He accepted the channel. Dreth Sokon's face appeared on the main screen, filling it with gray skin and unblinking eyes. "Human commander," Sokon said. "You are in the way." Nathan looked at him calmly. "My name is Nathan Cole, Admiral of the United Defense Corps, and I am exactly where I intend to be." Sokon tilted his head slightly, the Verath equivalent of mild amusement. "You have 68 ships. I have 314. You must understand what those numbers mean." "I understand numbers," Nathan said. "I also understand that 80 million of my people are on the planet behind me. I am not going to move, and I am not going to let you take them." "You have 12 hours, Sokon said. "Remove your fleet and begin the evacuation, or I will remove your fleet for you. This is not a negotiation." The channel closed. Nathan stood very still for a moment. Then he turned to Greg Holt. "Where is Kevin?" 40 minutes out, Greg said. He is on a fast transport from Europa. Good. When he arrives, bring him to me directly. No stops, no questions, no records. Greg nodded and left the bridge. Nathan looked back at the viewport. The Verath fleet hung in space like a dark cloud, blocking out the stars behind it. 314 ships, each one built to kill. Nathan had 12 hours. He intended to use them. Kevin Marsh arrived on the Adamant Vigil, looking like a man who had not slept in a week, because he had not. He carried a metal case the size of a large suitcase, and he held it with both hands, as if it might break, or as if he was afraid of it. 2 armed guards escorted him from the shuttle bay to the Admiral's private briefing room, where Nathan was waiting alone. Kevin set the case on the table and opened it. Inside, surrounded by a web of cables and small blinking lights, sat a smooth black sphere about the size of a basketball. "This is it," Kevin said. "One Oblivion device, fully armed, fully calibrated." Nathan looked at it. Such a small thing. It sat on the table like a paperweight, quiet and harmless. It was hard to believe that this small black ball could erase a piece of the universe. "Walk me through it," Nathan said. Kevin sat down and rubbed his face. When activated, it generates a field that expands outward in a perfect sphere. Everything inside the field is removed from existence. Not destroyed, removed. The matter, the energy, even the space-time inside the field stops being real. What is left behind is a void, a hole where something used to be. There is no explosion, no radiation, no debris, just nothing. And the radius. This unit is calibrated for 12 kilometers. That is enough to erase a small moon completely. I can adjust it down for a smaller demonstration if you want. Nathan stared at the device. "I do not want to use this on anyone." "I know," Kevin said quietly, "but I need them to know that I can. Something big enough to be undeniable, but something that does not hurt anyone." Nathan had already thought about this. On the far side of the system, well away from New Cascadia and the fleet standoff, there was a barren moon designated KX-7. It was a dead rock, about 9 kilometers across. No atmosphere, no water, no life of any kind. Surveys had confirmed it 100 times. Nothing lived there. Nothing had ever lived there. KX-7, Nathan said. "We put the device on the surface, pull back to a safe distance, and activate it remotely. The moon disappears. Every sensor in the system, ours and theirs, records what happens." Kevin looked at him. And then I tell Dreth Sokan to go home." While Nathan and Kevin made their plans, Laura Bishop was acting on her own. From her ship, still in transit from the Selthari homeworld, she composed a message and sent it on an encrypted channel to every single member of the Orion Conclave. Every elder species, every minor member, every observer and affiliate. Hundreds of civilizations received her words at the same time. The message was not a plea. Laura was done pleading. "To all members of the Orion Conclave," the message read, "humanity has developed a technology that your scientists cannot explain, your shields cannot stop, and your fleets cannot survive. This is not a bluff. This is not a negotiation. Within the next few hours, you will see proof. I am asking you one final time to recall the Verath fleet and negotiate with us as equals. If you do not, what comes next is your choice, not ours." The Conclave received the message, they read it, and they ignored it. Laura had expected nothing less. Back at the standoff, Nathan set the plan in motion. He needed a distraction. The Verath had scout ships patrolling the edges of the system, watching every move the human fleet made. If a ship suddenly broke formation and headed for a random moon, the Verath would notice and possibly interfere. Danielle Price solved that problem. Danielle was 29 years old and had been flying combat fighters since she was 19. She led a squadron of 12 fast attack craft that were the sharpest edge of the human fleet. She was fearless in a cockpit, creative under pressure, and had a reputation for doing things that flight instructors said were impossible. Nathan called her to the bridge and explained what he needed. Take your squadron and make noise near the Varath outer perimeter. Draw their scouts toward you. Do not engage, do not provoke, but make them watch you instead of the rest of the system. Danielle grinned. How close do you want me to get? Close enough to make them nervous, not close enough to get killed. I can work with that. 12 small, fast ships streaked toward the edge of the Varath formation, running sensor sweeps and communication bursts that lit up every detection system in the area. The Varath scouts turned to follow them, just as Nathan had planned. While the Varath were watching Danielle, a single unmarked transport ship slipped away from the Adamant Vigil and headed for KX-7. Kevin Marsh was aboard, along with the Oblivion device and a 2-person technical team. They reached the moon in under an hour, landed on its gray, cratered surface, and placed the device on a flat section of rock. Kevin activated the timer himself. His hands were steady, which surprised him. He set it for 30 minutes. Then the team returned to the transport and flew to a safe distance of 500 kilometers. Kevin sent a single message to Nathan. Device is set. 30 minutes. Nathan Cole opened a broadcast on every frequency available, military and civilian, human and alien. He said, all ships in the new Cascadia system, human and conclave, direct your sensors toward the moon designated KX-7 in the outer system. In approximately 25 minutes, you will witness something that has never happened before. Watch carefully. On 314 Varath ships, sensor officers turned their instruments toward KX-7. On 68 human ships, crews held their breath. On New Cascadia, 80 million people looked up at a sky they couldn't see through. The timer reached 0. The Oblivion device activated. A field of absolute nothing expanded outward from the surface of KX-7 at a speed that sensors could barely track. In less than 2 seconds, the field covered the entire moon. And then, KX-7 was gone. Not broken, not scattered, not glowing with heat or surrounded by debris. Gone. Where a moon had been orbiting for billions of years, there was now empty space. Perfectly empty. No dust, no fragments, no radiation. No energy signature of any kind. The rock, the metal, the ice, all 9 kilometers of ancient stone had been removed from existence, as if it had never been there. Every sensor in the system recorded the same thing. Every ship, human and Varath, saw the same impossible data. A moon had been erased. The silence that followed lasted a long time. No one spoke. No one moved. The vacuum of space had always been quiet, but this was a different kind of quiet. This was the quiet of every living being in the system, realizing that the rules had changed. Nathan Cole opened a direct channel to Dret Sokhan. The War Marshal's face appeared on the screen. For the first time, his expression was not bored or amused. It was something Nathan had never seen on a Varath face before. It was uncertainty. Nathan spoke calmly and clearly. That was a moon, War Marshal. A dead rock, nothing more. No one was harmed. But I want you to understand something. That device is not the only one we can build, and the next one will not be aimed at a rock. He paused and let the silence do its work. Withdraw your fleet. Sokhan stared at him through the screen. His 4 hands gripped the arms of his command chair. He did not speak for nearly a full minute. Then he cut the channel and contacted the conclave. For the first time in 200 years of command, Dret Sokhan asked someone else what to do. Across the galaxy, on stations and homeworlds and ships, the recording of KX-7's disappearance spread from screen to screen. Scientists studied the data and could not explain it. Military commanders watched and could not counter it. Diplomats whispered in halls and could not spin it. Humanity had just shown the galaxy a weapon that could not be stopped. And now the galaxy had to decide what to do about it. The Conclave's emergency session began within hours of the KX-7 demonstration, and it did not stop for 6 days. On Aethon Prime, in the same great chamber where Laura Bishop had been humiliated months earlier, the representatives of the galaxy's oldest civilizations argued, shouted, threatened, and whispered. Some of them did not sleep. Some of them did not need to. At the center of the debate was a single question that none of them had ever needed to ask before. What do you do when the species you dismissed as children just showed you they can erase you from existence? Quorus, the Selthari elder, spoke on the first day. He stood before the assembly with his silver eyes calm and his voice quiet. And he said what many of them were thinking, but none of them wanted to admit. We made an error, Quorus said. For a century, we treated humanity as a nuisance. We denied their petitions. We ignored their contributions. We allowed the Vereth to claim their worlds. And now they have built something that makes all of our fleets, all of our weapons, all of our centuries of military power meaningless. We must de-escalate. We must negotiate. Because the alternative is gambling with our survival. And that is a bet I will not take. The Varath delegation rejected his words before he finished speaking. Their senior representative, a military strategist named Kelth Varan, stood and addressed the chamber with the cold confidence of a species that had never bowed to anyone. The humans have one device, Kelth said. Perhaps two. They demonstrated it on an empty rock to frighten us. And I see that it has worked on some of you. But this is a bluff, a desperate, clever bluff from a desperate, clever species. If we strike now, with everything we have, we can destroy their fleet, their research facilities, and their ability to produce more of these weapons before they ever get the chance. And if you are wrong? Quorus asked. If they have more than one device? If even a single one survives your attack? Kelth looked at him with something close to contempt. Then we will deal with the consequences. The consequences, Quorus said slowly, would be the end of the Varath Dominion. Every ship, every station, possibly your homeworld itself, erased. Not conquered, not occupied, erased. That is not a consequence, that is extinction. The chamber buzzed with noise. Dozens of species talked over each other. The smaller members of the conclave, races that had been overshadowed by the elder civilizations for thousands of years, watched with expressions that ranged from fear to fascination to something that looked very much like hope. The debate continued for days. Arguments went in circles. Alliances shifted. Private meetings happened in dark corners. On the third day, the Varath presented a formal military plan to the full assembly. The plan called for a combined strike force drawn from 12 civilizations. A fleet of over 2,000 warships that would hit Earth's territory from multiple directions simultaneously. The goal was to destroy the human fleet, occupy New Cascadia, and demolish the research base on Europa before any Oblivion device could be deployed. It was the largest military operation proposed in the Conclave's history. The vote came on the 6th day. It was close. The Selthari voted against it. 3 smaller member species joined them. But the Vereth, along with 7 other elder civilizations, voted in favor. The margin was narrow, but it was enough. The Conclave had authorized war, not just against New Cascadia, against humanity itself. Laura Bishop was on Aethon Prime when the vote was announced. She had spent the past 6 days in a small room near the chamber, sending messages, making calls, and trying to find anyone in the conclave willing to block the resolution. She had failed. When the final count was read, Laura sat down on the edge of her bed and stared at the floor. She thought about the garden on the Selthari homeworld, the soft glow of the plants, and the look in Quorus's eyes when he had warned her. She thought about her parents on Earth, about the students she had taught at the Linguistics Academy, about the future she had believed was possible. Then she picked up her communicator and sent a message to Nathan Cole. The message was short. They chose this, not us. Nathan received the message aboard the Adamant Vigil, still holding position near New Cascadia. The Varath fleet had not moved in 6 days, but now Nathan knew why. They were waiting for reinforcements. 2,000 ships were coming. He read Laura's message twice. Then he closed his eyes and sat alone in his quarters for a long time. When he opened his eyes, he made a call to Kevin Marsh. "How many can you build in 30 days?" Nathan asked. Kevin did not hesitate. He had been running the numbers since the demonstration. "Enough," he said. That single word set everything in motion. Over the next 3 weeks, humanity moved with a speed and a unity that surprised even those who were part of it. The word went out from Earth to every colony, every station, every ship. The details were classified, but the message was simple. We are building what we need to survive, and everyone helps. Europa became a fortress. Kevin Marsh expanded his team from 12 to 300. Scientists, engineers, and technicians arrived from across human space. Many of them volunteers who asked no questions and expected no answers. Assembly lines were built in the ice caverns beneath the surface. Components were manufactured on 6 different worlds and shipped to Europa in encrypted cargo containers. Kevin worked 20-hour days and pushed his people to their limits. On the Adamant Vigil, Nathan coordinated the military preparations. Greg Holt reorganized the fleet into fast-moving carrier groups, each one designed to operate independently and carry multiple Oblivion devices. The strategy was not conventional warfare. Nathan had no interest in matching the Conclave ship for ship. His plan was deterrence through devastation. If the Conclave fleet attacked, it would pay a price so enormous that no civilization would ever threaten humanity again. Danielle Price was given command of the lead carrier group. Nathan called her to his ready room and explained her mission. She would be the first into the fight. Her ships would carry the first Oblivion devices into combat range. The mission profiles were, in practical terms, one-way trips. The pilots who flew them might not come back. Danielle listened to every word. When Nathan finished, she asked only one question. "When do we launch?" "When I give the order," Nathan said, "and I hope I never have to." Danielle left the room and went to her squadron. She told her pilots what was coming. She did not soften the truth. She told them the odds, the risks, and the stakes. Then she asked for volunteers. Every single pilot raised their hand. On New Cascadia, Tony Ruiz had not stopped working since the standoff began. The evacuation was over, one way or another. The people who were going to leave had left. The people who were going to stay had stayed. And there were millions who stayed. Tony organized them. He set up supply networks, communication systems, and defensive positions. He was not a general. He was a former Marine with dirt under his fingernails. But he understood how ordinary people found courage when they had something worth fighting for. Tony recorded one more broadcast. It was shorter than his first one. He looked into the camera with tired eyes and said, "They want us gone. We are still here." The message spread across every human colony in a matter of hours. As the combined Conclave fleet began assembling and moving toward Earth's territory, Nathan Cole made one final decision. He would send a message. Not a military order, not a diplomatic note. A message to the entire galaxy, broadcast on every frequency, translated into every known language, aimed at every species that could hear it. He wrote it himself. He sat alone in his quarters with a blank screen, and wrote, deleted, and rewrote for hours. When he was finished, he read it once more, changed nothing, and scheduled it for broadcast. The message went out at 0600 hours, Earth Standard Time, on the day the Conclave fleet entered the outer boundary of human space. Every ship received it. Every station heard it. Every planet with a receiver picked it up. Billions of living beings, across hundreds of worlds, heard the voice of a single human man speaking calmly and clearly. To the civilizations of the Orion Conclave, and to every species listening across the stars, humanity asked for peace. We asked for a place among you. We asked to build alongside you. Every hand we extended was pushed away. Every voice we raised was silenced. You looked at us and saw something small, something temporary, something beneath your attention. And now you come to erase us. But we will not go quietly. We have built something that your empires, with all their age and power, cannot undo. We did not want to use it. We still do not want to use it. But if you cross this line, if you come for our worlds, our families, our right to exist, then we will use it. Not to conquer, not to rule, to end whatever comes for us. Permanently. This is not a threat. This is a fact. Turn back, or you will learn what humanity does when it has nothing left to lose. This is Earth's final message to the galaxy. You just chose Oblivion. The broadcast ended. Nathan sat back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. Across the galaxy, on 1,000 different worlds, the message was played again and again. Translators worked through the night to render it in languages that had no words for what humanity was threatening. Military analysts dissected every sentence. Politicians debated its meaning. And on the bridges of 2,000 conclave warships, commanders looked at each other and wondered, for the first time, if they were flying toward a war they could actually lose. The fleet did not stop. The Verath pushed it forward. But the doubt had been planted, and doubt, once it takes root, is very hard to kill. Nathan Cole watched the sensor display on the bridge of the Adamant Vigil. 2,000 points of light, creeping closer. Behind him, his fleet was ready. Beneath the ice of Europa, Kevin's devices sat in their cradles, waiting. The galaxy had heard Earth's final message. Now it was time to see if anyone had listened. The combined conclave fleet crossed the outer perimeter of human space at 0347 hours, Earth Standard Time. 2,061 warships, drawn from 12 civilizations, arranged in a formation that stretched across thousands of kilometers of empty space. Dreth Sakon commanded the vanguard from his flagship, surrounded by the heaviest Verath battlecruisers. Behind him came the fleets of the other elder races, each one flying under its own flag, but all moving toward the same target. They expected to reach Earth within 18 hours. They expected to end this quickly. Nathan Cole had other plans. He did not wait for them to come to him. Waiting meant fighting on their terms, in their formation, at their pace. Instead, he sent his fleet forward in 12 independent carrier groups, spread wide across the approach corridors the Conclave fleet was using. Each group was small, no more than 5 or 6 ships, and each one carried multiple Oblivion devices in reinforced cargo bays. Danielle Price commanded the lead group. Her carrier, the Steady Hand, was an old ship that had been retrofitted in a hurry. The paint on the hull was still fresh. The Oblivion device in her cargo bay hummed with a low vibration she could feel through the deck plates when she stood still. She did not stand still very often. Her group reached the gas giant Artemis IV first, a massive ball of swirling orange and gold clouds orbiting at the edge of human space. Long-range sensors showed a Verath battle group approaching from the far side of the planet, a formation of about 50 warships cutting through the dark. Danielle opened a channel to her squadron. All ships, engage Pattern 6. Keep their eyes on us. Her fighters screamed forward, engines burning bright, running sensor sweeps and electronic jamming that lit up the Verath detection systems like a bonfire. The Verath battle group took the bait. 50 warships adjusted course to intercept Danielle's small group, confident in their overwhelming advantage. While the Vareth focused on the fighters, a single human frigate, a tiny ship called the Grey Finch, slipped around the far side of Artemis IV on a cold approach, with engines powered down and hull coated in sensor-absorbing material. The Grey Finch drifted silently into the center of the Vareth formation. The pilot of the Grey Finch was a young man named Sam Ortega. He was 24 years old. He had volunteered for this mission knowing exactly what it meant. He had written a letter to his mother before launching, and left it in his bunk on the steady hand. Sam activated the Oblivion device at 0412 hours. The field expanded outward in a perfect sphere, 12 kilometers in diameter, consuming everything it touched. 46 Varath warships were inside the radius. They did not explode, they did not break apart, they simply stopped existing. One moment they were there, thousands of tons of armor and weapons and crew. The next moment, they were not. The space where they had been was empty, perfectly and completely empty, as if nothing had ever occupied it. Sam Ortega's frigate was inside the radius too. The Grey Finch vanished along with the Varath ships. Sam never felt a thing. He was there, and then he was not. Danielle Price watched the sensor display from her cockpit. 46 red dots vanished from her screen in less than a second. Where the Vareth battle group had been, there was now a hole in space, a sphere of absolute nothing, surrounded by the swirling clouds of Artemis IV. She closed her eyes for a moment. Then she opened them and said into her communicator, "First group is down. All stations, report." The effect on the Conclave fleet was immediate and devastating. Not in terms of numbers lost, 46 ships out of 2,000 was a small fraction, but in terms of what it meant. Every ship in the Conclave Armada received the sensor data at the same time. Every commander saw the same impossible readings. 46 warships had vanished without a trace. No wreckage, no survivors, no explanation that their science could offer. Panic spread faster than light. Commanders across the fleet began sending frantic messages to their homeworlds. Some demanded new orders. Some demanded reinforcements. Some demanded permission to retreat. On 3 of the 8 Elder Civilizations flagships, heated arguments broke out on the bridge between officers who wanted to press forward and officers who wanted to turn around. Nathan Cole opened individual communication channels to every Conclave commander he could reach. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He spoke to each one calmly, almost gently, the way someone might talk to a person standing on the edge of a cliff. "Each of you has a homeworld," he said. "Each of you has people waiting for you to come back. We can end this now. No more ships need to disappear. But if you advance, I cannot protect you from what comes next." 3 civilizations withdrew their fleets within hours. The Selfari were first. Their ships turned and left the formation with quiet dignity, their commander offering a brief salute to the human fleet as they passed. 2 smaller coalition members followed, their captains citing orders from home to disengage. The formation shrank, but the Varath and their closest allies pushed forward. Dreth Sokon had spent 200 years building a reputation as a commander who never retreated. He was not going to start now. "They have spent their surprise," Sokon told his officers. "They cannot have many of these weapons. Press forward. Destroy the carriers before they can deploy again." He was wrong. The second Oblivion detonation happened near the orbit of Mars. A human carrier group had positioned itself along the Varath's direct approach to Earth, and when the Vanguard fleet entered range, a small shuttle carrying a single device slipped into the middle of their formation and activated. 112 ships vanished. The flagship's shields, the strongest in the Varath fleet, meant nothing. They were not pierced or overwhelmed. They simply stopped existing, along with everything they were supposed to protect. Dreth Sokon was not in the radius. His flagship had been positioned half a kilometer outside the sphere's edge. He watched from his bridge as over 100 of his ships, carrying thousands of his people, were erased from the universe in less than 2 seconds. The bridge was silent. Sokan stared at the empty space on his sensor display. His 4 hands gripped the arms of his chair until the metal creaked. Then he opened a direct channel to Nathan Cole. The two of them looked at each other through their screens. Nathan's face was tired. Sokan's face was something Nathan had never seen on a Verath before. It was not anger. It was the expression of someone who had just realized, for the first time in his very long life, that he was not the most dangerous thing in the room. Would you really destroy an entire civilization to protect your own? Sokan asked. Nathan did not look away. I would destroy everything to protect my people, and so would you. That is why you should stop. Sokan said nothing for a long time. His officers stood around him, waiting. The entire fleet was waiting. Then Dreth Sokan, War Marshal of the Verath Dominion, veteran of 100 campaigns, gave an order he had never given before. All ships, hold position, cease advance. The war stopped. Over the next 72 hours, a ceasefire was negotiated. Laura Bishop, working from Aethon Prime with Chorus and a coalition of moderate conclave members, hammered out terms that would have been unthinkable a month earlier. Humanity was granted full membership in the Orion Conclave, with immediate and permanent territorial protections for all 17 colony worlds. The Oblivion technology was placed under a mutual oversight framework. Humanity retained sole possession, but agreed never to use it offensively. A new accord was drafted, giving younger species a clear path to conclave membership without centuries of submission and humiliation. The galaxy would never be the same. On New Cascadia, Tony Ruiz stood on the steps of the community hall and watched the last Verath ships pull away from orbit. The sky was clear and blue, the way it always was in the late afternoon. Children were playing in the street nearby, chasing each other and laughing, completely unaware of how close they had come to losing everything. Tony sat down on the steps and let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for months. He did not say anything. He just sat there and watched the sky. On the Adamant Vigil, Danielle Price brought her battered fighter into the landing bay and shut down the engines. She pulled off her helmet and sat in the cockpit for a long time. Her hands were shaking. They had not shaken during the battle, not during the deployments, not during any of it. But now, in the quiet, they would not stop. She thought about Sam Ortega. She thought about his letter, still sitting in his bunk on the steady hand. She would read it later. She owed him that much. Kevin Marsh returned to Europa when it was over. He walked through the laboratory where he had built the devices and looked at the remaining prototypes sitting in their cradles. He locked them in a reinforced vault, sealed the door, and authorized a security protocol that required 3 separate codes to open it. Nathan Cole called him the next day. "Do you think they will leave us alone now?" Nathan asked. "I think they will leave us alone for as long as that vault stays closed," Kevin said. "After that, it depends on whether they listened." "And if they did not?" Kevin looked at the vault door and said nothing. Laura Bishop came home 6 months later. She had spent the time on Aethon Prime building the new diplomatic framework and making sure the accords held. When she landed on Earth, a crowd was waiting at the port. Reporters pushed forward with questions. One of them asked her what she thought the galaxy had learned from everything that had happened. Laura stood in the sunlight. She looked tired, but her eyes were clear. She thought about the great chamber on Aethon Prime, about Torvon's dismissal, about the look on Chorus's face in the garden, about Nathan's voice on the broadcast, about Tony on his steps, and Danielle in her cockpit, and Kevin in his lab, and Sam Ortega, who would never come home. They learned, Laura said, that the quietest voice in the room can also be the last one you ever hear. 50 years later, humanity was one of the most respected members of the Orion Conclave. Not because of the Oblivion weapon, because of what they built afterward. Alliances with species who had never been given a chance. Technologies shared freely across civilizations. Cultural exchanges that changed the way entire worlds thought about themselves and each other. Schools on alien planets that taught human history alongside their own. Hospitals that served species with biology so different they could not even breathe the same air. Humanity had been given a seat at the table, not because they asked for it, and not because they earned it by being patient. They earned it by making the cost of saying no too high to bear. And then once they had their seat, they did something the elder races had never expected. They used it to help everyone else sit down too. The Oblivion Vault on Europa was never opened. It sat deep beneath the ice, sealed and silent, guarded by systems that would outlast the people who built them. A small plaque had been mounted on the wall beside the vault door. The words on it were simple. Here rests the weapon we built, because no one would listen. May it never wake. Visitors came sometimes. Scientists, diplomats, students, soldiers. They stood in front of the plaque and read the words and thought about what they meant. Some of them felt pride. Some felt sadness. Some felt fear. All of them understood. Laura Bishop stood alone at the center of the largest room she had ever seen. The chamber stretched so far in every direction that the walls disappeared into a pale blue mist. Thousands of seats rose in curved rows above her. And in those seats sat the representatives of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. Some had skin like polished stone. Others had too many eyes, or no eyes at all. A few floated in sealed containers, filled with gases that would kill a human in seconds. They were all watching her. She had spent 10 years learning their languages, their customs, their history. She had memorized every rule of their assembly. She had practiced this speech in front of mirrors, in empty rooms, in her sleep. She had crossed 200 light-years to stand in this spot on the neutral station called Athon Prime. And now, finally, it was her turn to speak. Honored members of the Orion Conclave, she began. Her voice was steady. She had trained it to be steady. Humanity comes before you today, as it has come before, to request full membership in this assembly. We believe we have earned it. In the past century, we have settled 17 worlds. We have built cities, hospitals, universities, and shipyards. We have traded fairly with every species willing to trade with us. We have honored every treaty we have signed. We are ready to stand among you, not above you, not below you, but beside you. The chamber was silent for a moment. Then a low sound began from the upper rows, a rumble that was not quite laughter and not quite disgust. It was something in between. The presiding arbiter, a Verath elder named Torvon, unfolded his tall gray body from his seat and looked down at Laura. The Verath were one of the oldest species in the conclave. They had been building empires when humans were still living in caves. Torvon had 4 arms, a narrow skull, and eyes that never blinked. His voice echoed through the chamber, like stone scraping against stone. And the petition is denied. Children do not sit among architects. That was it. No debate, no discussion, no vote. Torvon sat back down, and the next item on the agenda was called. Laura stood there for 3 more seconds, her face perfectly still, and then she turned and walked out. She did not cry until she was alone on her ship. Back on Earth, in a gray underground room beneath the Atlantic Ocean, a group of men and women in military uniforms watched the recording of Laura's speech. None of them spoke for a long time after it ended. Nathan Cole sat at the head of the table. He was 42 years old, with short dark hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from something hard. He was the Fleet Admiral of Earth's United Defense Corps, the highest military rank a human could hold. He commanded 68 warships and 400,000 personnel from his flagship, the Adamant Vigil. He had watched the recording twice. The second time, he watched the faces of the aliens in the chamber instead of Laura. He studied their expressions. Some looked bored, some looked annoyed. A few, from the smaller and younger species, looked uncomfortable. But most of them looked at Laura the way a person might look at an insect that had crawled onto their dinner table. "That is the fourth time in 100 years," said Greg Holt, Nathan's second in command. Greg was a big man with a thick neck and the kind of voice that carried across a ship deck without trying. "Fourth time we asked. Fourth time they said no." "They did not just say no," Nathan said quietly. "They said we do not matter." The room stayed silent. Nathan stood up. "We continue as planned. Maintain all fleet readiness, double patrol schedules on the outer colonies, and someone get Laura home safe." The meeting ended. The officers filed out. Nathan stayed behind and stared at the blank screen where Laura's face had been. He thought about his brother, Danny, who had died 3 years ago when a Vereth patrol ship opened fire on a human mining vessel near the outer rim. The Conclave had ruled it an accident. No punishment, no apology. Just a note in a file somewhere that said a human ship had been in the wrong place. Nathan closed his eyes and breathed out slowly. Then he picked up a secure communicator and made a call he had been putting off for 6 months. On the frozen moon of Europa, buried beneath 2 miles of ice, Kevin Marsh had not slept in 31 hours. He sat in a small laboratory surrounded by screens and equipment that hummed with a low, constant vibration. His hair was gray and messy. His glasses sat crooked on his nose. He was 50 years old and looked 60. Kevin was the director of Project Helix, a research program so secret that fewer than 40 people in all of human civilization knew it existed. The project had been created 15 years ago to study dark energy manipulation, the idea that the invisible force pushing the universe apart could be captured, focused, and used. For most of those 15 years, the project had produced nothing but theories and failures. Then, 11 days ago, Kevin had found something. He had not been looking for it. He had been running a routine calibration on one of the containment fields when the readings went wrong. Not wrong in the way that meant a mistake, wrong in the way that meant something new. He spent 3 days checking and rechecking the data. Then he spent 2 days running simulations. Then he sat in his chair and did not move for a very long time because he understood what he had found. The containment field had briefly created a localized collapse in spacetime. A tiny area, smaller than a grain of sand, had simply stopped existing. Not exploded, not burned, not broken apart. It had been removed from reality itself. The matter that had been there, the energy, even the space, was gone. There was nothing left, not even emptiness, just an absence. Kevin ran more tests. He scaled up the field by a fraction. A marble-sized hole in reality opened and closed in less than a second. Everything inside it was erased as if it had never been. He understood immediately what this meant. This was not a power source. This was not a tool, a weapon that could erase anything. A ship, a city, a planet, a star, and leave behind nothing but a void that could never be filled. He called it Oblivion. When his communicator buzzed and Nathan Cole's name appeared on the screen, Kevin answered it with hands that would not stop shaking. "Admiral," he said, "I think you need to come see this." "Tell me what it is, Kevin." Kevin looked at the data on his screens. He looked at the empty space in his containment chamber where a steel cube had been sitting an hour ago. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "I found something that can end a war before it starts," he said. "Or end everything else." Nathan was quiet for 5 seconds. "I am on my way." 6 hours later, Nathan Cole boarded a transport shuttle and left Earth without telling anyone where he was going. Somewhere Far above in the cold sky, a tiny conclave surveillance probe adjusted its orbit around Jupiter and recorded an unusual energy signature coming from beneath the ice of Europa. The probe flagged the reading and sent it home across the stars. The elder races had been watching humanity for a long time. They had just never been worried before.